everyone. Quick survey. How many entrepreneurs, people working for startups in the audience here? Wow, everybody else is a VC. Great, or something else. Great to meet everyone here. We all love to talk about success. Maybe we like to hear about success a little less, I don't know. And talking about failure is in vogue, but I find it often not that helpful if we don't get specific. So I thought I'd just share a few lessons learned from failure over the last several startups. Talk a little bit about background, these lessons learned, and what I think is going to be one of the most important skills for entrepreneurs to refine and develop. Background, I think, I've, like many of you, started and sold a number of companies over the years. Born in Vietnam, live there now. My most recent company was a company called Misfit Wearables. We made wearable technology that was beautiful. That was what our focus was on, making technology beautiful or invisible. We were acquired by Fossil Group 3 years ago, and I left. It's really a fashion group brand. And since then, since leaving about a year ago, I've been investing in and advising deep tech startups, focused mostly on climate change reversal. So that's what, I guess, pays the bills these days. But I wanted to talk a bit about these lessons, because over these several startups, I feel like I've personally had a chance to learn a lot. So I'm going to go rapid fire through this, if you don't mind, and try to be as specific as possible. Hiring, we all have to do that, and in the very first startup, one of the things I learned was it wasn't just about hiring for really smart people, IQ, brain teasers. It was really about getting people with great skills. Hiring for strength instead of lack of weaknesses, something that took a while for me to figure out, and I found out that this is something that's really held up over the years. And after learning these things, I felt, okay, let's just hire people with lots of experience. And that didn't always actually work out well. And what I've learned is that it's really about trying to hire people with great wisdom. How do you interview for wisdom in an interview when you're considering a candidate? That's not the easiest thing. I find that it's most useful to really work with someone, even if it's like for a week. A lot of this comes out. And finally, at Misfit, one of the most important things I learned there, it sounds a little trite, but it's very true, cultural fit above all, making sure that teams are cohesive and that they bond well, that they look after each other. And so these are the things that I've learned about hiring. I'm sure you may have felt the same way in your own journeys. And at the end of the day, it's about the sell to great candidates, to great recruits, is the fact that in a startup, you get one of the great benefits is you get to do things that you're not qualified for, like what this kid's getting to do. How cool is that? When I was 8, I never had a chance to drive a bulldozer like that. And speaking of hiring, and we talk about culture and whatnot, a lot of it comes down to values. I think we talk about this a lot, but I also find that a lot of the discussion can be very watered down, very diluted, because a lot of the values that we see out there a lot of times on the posters, in offices and whatnot, I find are they're not specific enough. What I found is that having values that can actually help drive decisions, that can be very cutting. And oftentimes some of these values can be kind of controversial, but it very clearly defines who you are. It defines who you are not. Pretty important. At Misfit, we had our set of values, be a misfit, that is, do things that are different. We often asked ourselves, is that a misfit thing to do? And that really became a thing. Doing more with less, and be a servant leader. Leaders are servers first in what we did. But I would just encourage you to really think for yourself. It's about having values that's important for you, and that you have conviction around, that your initial team has conviction around, and that you're going to stand by. and values are things that can change over time, that you'll add and augment to. I'd suggest keeping it few instead of having 10. I've seen companies with 10 company values, and I just find that very hard to remember. One of my favorite companies that has a really cool vision and mission statement, very clear set of values, is a company called V, and they make a really cool hearable an AI fitness coach, and so the product is really cool. But what they do is, but what a simple vision. We exist to help people reach their full potential in body and mind. Very clear statement there, and very cool product. So you've got your team, you've got your values. Now we got to lead the team. We talk about leadership a lot as well. And again, how to be very specific about things. And I'll just share with you 3 things that I've learned over the years. Having conviction is very important. Strong opinions. But I found that some of the best people that we've had are people who have conviction, but are able to change their minds. That when they're wrong, they say, yep, I'm wrong. They admit it, and they move on, and it's not a big deal. I find that exceedingly rare, actually. But when you have folks like that on your team, it's just wonderful. It's a great quote by Groucho Marx here. And along the lines of servant leadership, which I think is very important, at the end of the day, as the founder, as the CEO, as a senior team member of your startup, you're serving your team members. That's your role. That's what you're doing day in, day out. So eat last, fly coach, keep that mindset for a long time. We were well-funded for years, and we always asked this of our leaders. And finally, stand up for what you believe in. Having strong convictions, being able to change, that's good. But standing for what you believe in, even in the face of a lot of opposition, it's very important. And there's a great quote I learned from a mentor that I think summarizes why this is important. It's because the regret that comes from doing something that you shouldn't have is often temporary. But the regret that comes from not doing something you should have is inconsolable. How true is that? I think it's one of these lessons that, once again, took me several startups to learn, but, learning is half the battle, right? So have strong opinions, loosely held, eat last, fly coach, serve your teams, and stand up for what you believe in. And finally, execution. You can have great team, great values, amazing leadership, but if execution is not at the core of what you're doing, if building a company is not what's important to you versus building a product, then it's going to be a hard road. So build a business, not just a product. And if you're in building a business, be lean. Who here has read the Lean Startup? I feel like it's like standard. It's a great book. If you haven't read it, the quick summary, the 15-second summary is this. It's about always getting user feedback. It's about knowing when to pivot, change your business model in some way or your product in some way. And it's about maximizing the number of pivots by minimizing the cost of experimentation. So that's it. That's the summary of being lean for the most part. And so the core part of execution, building a business, not just a product. As a CEO, that's what you're focused on. It really, as anyone in the core team, that's what it's about. And be lean as you do this. And whether you are a SaaS software company or a deep tech company working on biotechnology or something, every company I find has a lean playbook that is accessible to them. One of my favorite companies that's super lean, a company called Sensibo. I actually brought one of these products. It's one of my favorite products. They shipped over nearly 100,000 units, built the hardware, the cloud, the app. Just an amazing product. And what it is it's a controller for your air conditioning unit. It makes these remote control air conditioning units Wi-Fi controlled. And and you think, they're doing millions of dollars in revenue. You think massive team, right? That's the team. 2 people. They've hired 2 more since then. but it's just an unbelievably lean team that has really learned how to get to product market fit. And so I thought in the last few minutes, I would just wrap up with one final point. And that is around what I think is the most important skill for entrepreneurs. So what do you think is the most important skill? I mean, this is largely opinion, I suppose, but for me, it's born out of my experience out of these few startups. Any takers? I'm going to give a Sensible unit to whoever gets it right, which is whoever agrees with me. Learning. That's a great one. That's the best skill. That's a pretty important skill. Someone here? Yep. I'm sorry? Grit. Having grit, being able to survive, being the cockroach and surviving to fight another day. A very important skill. Yes, indeed. Passion, having that conviction to go against, common wisdom. Very important. Anyone out here? Yep. The ability to adjust, to adapt, also incredibly important. I'm sorry? Empathy. That's a good one. Empathy. All of these things are really important, right? But remember, we're about building a business here. So, I'm sorry? Listening. Okay. Listening, I think you could probably build a business through listening. Profit. Who said that? Oh, man. That's right. We can build products, maybe not throw things. Sales. The stereotype is this, right? It's not what I'm talking about. You do have to sell the customers, move product and get profit, right? Very important. But you're also trying to convince people to join you for half the salary that they would normally make, right? You're trying to get investors to give you money when they probably should be investing in something a lot less risky, right? You're trying to get partners. You get your wall of logos, companies to work with you when they probably shouldn't work with you because you might be running out of money in about 3 to 6 months. And of course, the media. You're trying to get TechCrunch to write about you when there's really not a whole lot to write about, but you just need the press so that you can get customers. And so these are all incredibly important. And that's what you're doing really as a founder, as a leadership team, day in and day out, is you're selling these different constituents to an extent. So that is an incredibly important role. And just to leave you with a few tips on this sales thing. It's not a talk about sales, but I would just leave it to a few things. First is doing your homework. You got to know who you're talking to, what they're interested in, what stories will resonate with them. And then once you've done your homework, then it's about telling those stories. It's about, if you're trying to get someone to write about you, it's about making sure that you do a lot of that work for them. And if you're trying to convince someone to part with their money, or in some ways their reputation because they're going to write about you or support you in some way, it's about focusing on amazing value. There's no qualms about it. People often ask, what's the secret to sales? It's about amazing value. And finally, it's about showing up. And as a wise man once said, showing up is 80% of life, right? So that's it. Do your homework. So build a business. Sales is what you're doing. And to do so, do your homework. Tell stories that resonate. Focus on exceptional value. And show up. Thank you so much for your time.